Congratulations! You've been invited to interview at Wharton. Great work! In this video, I'm going to walk you through some quick tips to prepare. And who am I? My name is Maria. I'm a 2005 graduate of Harvard Business School, a former board member of AGAC, and the founder of ApplicantLab, the online platform that is replacing the need for traditional admissions consulting. ApplicantLab recently launched the MBA Interview Lab, which provides advice for every possible interview question you might encounter for the low introductory price of only $49.
Let's talk about the Wharton Interview. First of all, as you may know, the Wharton Interview is by invitation only, so you are only allowed to interview after your written application materials have been reviewed. And how is this interview structured? Well, there's actually two parts to the Wharton Interview. It's not just one interview. It's kind of two different interviews or two different exercises that make up the interview. The first is the team-based discussion, also referred to as the TBD for short. And then after the TBD, there is usually a brief post-TBD one-on-one interview. So let's dive into each of these individual pieces, and I can give you some of my best tips. So for the TBD will be about 35 minutes in length, and what happens is that you will be in a room with about 5 other applicants. The groups tend to range between, say, sort of 4 to 6 people, and this group is assigned completely randomly. It's assigned based on simply, what time slot works for you and what time slot worked for other people, and so there's no, don't freak out and think to yourself like, oh, there's all this orchestrations happening behind the scenes as to who I was chosen to be in the TBD with. No, it's completely random. And in addition to the other applicants who are in your group, there will be about 2 observers in the room. These people will be paying close attention to the interpersonal dynamics occurring during the team-based interview. They will probably be taking lots of notes. They'll either be writing them or they will definitely be taking a lot of mental notes. So these are the people, a lot of your fate rests in the hand of these 2 observers. I don't want you to be self-conscious though, because if you keep sort of turning to look at them, that would be weird. But I'm just letting you know that that's sort of the role of the observers, is to make sure that the dynamics within the discussion are going well. They will not interfere, however. They are simply there to observe. These are usually second-year students, especially if you are interviewing on campus. So what happens is that with a TBD, you are given some sort of a topic in advance. You will be given 1 minute at the beginning to pitch your idea. So prior to showing up to your TBD, you do need to think of something to propose. Then you get about a minute to introduce yourself and introduce your idea. And then with the remainder of the time, as a team, you need to collectively come to a shared conclusion. That is, together you need to agree on a path forward, and then at the end you present what your idea is to the observers in the room. Now, the topic of the team-based discussion changes every single year. The one thing that is always the same about it, though, is that it usually highlights something cool about Wharton. When you think about it, this is kind of a clever idea on their part, because not only does the TBD topic serve as a great way to try to ascertain what somebody's interpersonal dynamics are when they are in a group, but it also is kind of a marketing exercise, right? It's a way to let prospective applicants and candidates know about, look at this cool thing we do at Wharton that maybe other schools don't do. So what happens is that they will tell you, they will pick something that is cool about Wharton, and then they will ask you for ideas on how to improve it, how to come up with a new version of an existing offering, or how to improve an existing offering. So just to give you a sense, some previous topics have been, you needed to propose a new global modular course. You had to propose a new student-run conference idea. And then this year, the proposal has been, you need to come up with a schedule and an agenda for a 3-day retreat at the end of preterm. This is sort of your opportunity to get to know your brand new classmates as you all arrive to Wharton to begin your studies together. So whatever the topic ends up being, because it does change every year, one thing is the same. As a group, you all need to collectively design whatever this new thing is, and you need to explain it. So here are some of my top tips for the TBD. Notice that in the interest of time, I do not have all of my tips in here. Unfortunately, I can't possibly. I have over an hour of advice in the interview lab. If you go to mbainterviewlab.com, it's only $49, and in the MBA interview lab, I cover all of the top interview questions that all of the top business schools give, including the Harvard Business School interview and including the Wharton TBD. For the Wharton TBD, I have over an hour of advice just for the Wharton TBD, including feedback from current Wharton students who have been through the TBD, so we get that firsthand view from them, some sort of insider info from them regarding the topic at hand. So just a heads up that this is not going to be everything that I've got because we don't have an hour. We only have about 15 minutes. So here are some of my top tips. Number one, be cordial. I don't want you to dominate the conversation. Even if you think that your idea is the best idea, or even if normally you're the sort of person who does dominate conversations, remember the purpose of the TBD is not to find who has the best idea. You're not being graded on the quality of your idea. You're being graded on the quality of your interpersonal dynamics. Who are you within the group? Are you more of a giver than a taker? Are you someone who is supportive of others as opposed to someone who tries to hog glory for him or herself? So I don't want you to be the person who jumps in there and starts saying, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. Here's what our 3-day preterm, here's what we have to do at 11 a.m. on the first day, we're going to do this. And then at 12 p.m. we're going to do this. And then at 2 p.m. we're going to do that. Like, please don't be that person, because if you are, I guarantee you are almost guaranteed to be rejected. That having been said, I do want you to be strong and assertive. Don't be a pushover, right? If you propose an idea and it's one that you really believe in, and if it's one that has merit, if somebody disagrees with you, I don't want you to then go, okay, you're right, I guess my idea was terrible. There are ways for you to disagree with someone in a way that is in fact very cordial, but that still gets your point across. I don't want you to be this sort of passive person who just sort of says like, okay, whatever anyone else says, I'm just here along for the ride. I also don't want you to be silent, right? I know that this is a high stakes conversation. I know that you're going to be nervous. Trust me, everyone is nervous. So realize that everyone is nervous. And use that knowledge to push yourself to contribute something. Because if you're completely silent throughout the entire conversation, sure, the good news is you're not stepping on anyone else's toes, but the bad news is you're not really giving the observers a sense of who you are normally on a team. The other thing you need to be is flexible. This conversation might go in a million different directions. There is no way for you to tell in advance where it's going to go. So for example, let's say there are 5 people in the room for your TBD. Each of the 5 people proposes their idea for whatever the topic at hand is. That means there's only a 20% chance that your idea is the one that's going to be chosen. So if you walk into the TBD completely ready and set in stone and saying to yourself, this is the way things are going to be, this is my idea, and we are only going to do my idea, and my idea is the best one, the problem is there's an 80% chance that your idea is not going to be the one chosen. So you've got to be flexible and ready to go with the flow. Someone might have another idea that is completely different to yours, and you can't let that shake you. You can't let that freak you out. Just be, if you're cordial and flexible, you're going to be fine. Your goal in this conversation is to be someone who moves the conversation forward in a constructive and positive way. I want you to be a positive person in this group. I don't want you to be a negative naysayer. If normally you're sort of the person who brings up all the reasons why an idea can't work, leave that part of your persona at home. It's perfectly fine to bring up critiques. Again, in Interview Lab, I give you very specific tips on how to criticize someone's idea without criticizing the person. So how to do that in a diplomatic way that gets your point across without making you seem like a jerk. But your overall goal is to be someone who is positive and who is contributing to moving the conversation forward. So that way, that conclusion that the group comes to, it's a better conclusion, or it's reached faster, or it's reached more efficiently than it would have otherwise been reached. Your goal, I need to reiterate this, your goal for the TBD is not to be right. Your goal is not to have your idea chosen. The person whose idea gets chosen does not get extra points in any of this. The person who gets good points is the person who is moving the conversation forward. So hopefully that helps put your mind at ease. I do not want you spending, 3 weeks of your life researching the topic at hand and, obsessing over, what is this preterm orientation program going to be? And let me map out every 5 minutes of the schedule and come in with a 7-page agenda ready to go. That's overkill. You're just going to end up freaking yourself out, and you're just going to end up getting so married. You're going to fall in love so much with your idea that the problem is that you might lose that flexibility. So come in with some good ideas, enough to get you through that sort of 1 minute and maybe a little bit more, but your goal is not to be right. So don't worry if your idea isn't chosen. Regardless of the topic, in addition to coming to a conclusion as a group as to, what is our new modular course going to be? What is the new conference going to be? What is the preterm orientation going to be? There are other things that usually need to be kept in mind as well. There's usually a logistical component to things. So for example, if you're trying to come up with a 3-day retreat that's going to happen at the end of preterm, realize that, hey, Wharton is in Philadelphia. So if you propose a 3-day retreat that happens in, I don't know, California or Paris, that might be a cool idea. It might be an awesome idea. The problem is, how are you going to get to and from Paris, from Philadelphia, in only 3 days? The fact is, you're not going to be able to. So remember, keep in mind that your idea has to have a logistical logic component to it. Also keep in mind, what is something that will be appealing to the largest number of students, right? You don't want to come in with an idea that is so specific to you that you're the only student at Wharton that finds the idea appealing. Remember, part of the goal of this is to find something that appeals to a lot of students. So keep that in mind. As your group is going through its discussion, ask yourself, is this something that only appeals to 1 or 2 students, or is this something that can appeal to a large number of them? And if the idea is starting to get too granular, maybe part of your contribution to the discussion could be, hey guys, I love where we're going with this. However, I'm a little concerned that perhaps this may not be appealing to a large number of students. Is there any way we can broaden the topic so that more people feel included? Similarly, if your group is going on and on about all kinds of other topics related to the, all sorts of other ideas related to your topic, maybe you can be the person who brings up the logistics. Guys, going to Paris is very exciting. I love it. Unfortunately, remember, we only have 3 days. So I'm a little concerned that we're not going to have the time to really, implement this in the time allotted. Another way that you can contribute to the conversation, regardless of the topic that's chosen, is you can ask, what is the ultimate goal? In other words, how is success going to be defined, and how is it going to be measured for this new thing? This can help really guide the discussion, because as a group, the group might be the one who gets to define success, right? So maybe success is, at the end of the 3-day orientation, we're going to do a survey and ask everyone, how well do you think you got to know your classmates or your cluster mates through this experience? Or maybe success is defined by, at the end we ask every person, here's your study team, tell me something interesting about everyone else in your study team. And if you can do that, then we know for a fact that we succeeded in getting you to know other people. Or whatever. I'm just throwing out random ideas. It's up to you and the team to define what success is. So regardless of which direction or which topic ends up getting chosen, maybe something you can add to the discussion is saying, well, how are we going to define success? And maybe it's worth it spending a couple of minutes talking about, what is our ultimate goal here? Is the goal to get people to know each other? Is the goal to get people to like each other? Is the goal simply to get people to learn? What is the goal? Because the goal could really differ tremendously depending on who is in the room and what their priorities are. So the good news is, even if your idea isn't chosen, you can still contribute a ton to the discussion by focusing on some of these generic topics that are going to apply regardless of the specific topic chosen. Now here's something that's really important. You need to realize, and this is to reiterate that idea around being cordial, you need to realize that this is not a competition with other people in your group. I'm going to say that again in order to really get you to believe me that being cordial is important. This is not a competition with other people in your group. And how do I know? Well, I'm a member of AGAC. AGAC is the Organization for Elite Admissions Consultants. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it is, it's the organization that only the top of the field for admissions consultants are allowed to be members of it. I am not only a member, but I actually am a former board member of AGAC. And a couple of years ago, the AdCom of Wharton did a special presentation just for AGAC members. And in that presentation, they shared with us that some groups with the TBD actually have all of the people in the group, all of the people get accepted. And some groups have no people get accepted. So you might have heard the statistic that normally what happens for most schools is that the acceptance rate after interview, the interview acceptance rate tends to be about 50%, right? So roughly for most schools, roughly half the people, it might be 40%, it might be 60%, but it kind of evens out at around 50%. Around half the people invited to interview for any given school are usually then offered a spot. This does not mean that in your 6-person TBD group that 3 of you are definitely getting in and 3 of you aren't. It could be the case that all of you get in. It could be the case that none of you gets in. It could be that 1 person gets in. It could be that 5 out of 6 gets in. The performance in the TBD by itself, it's not a competition between the other members of the TBD. So hopefully this data point, this sort of admission secret that I can share with you, is one that helps put your fears to rest, that it is not about you dominating things and getting your idea chosen. Now, after the TBD, what's going to happen is that you're going to be put out into sort of a little waiting room, and then you're going to be called one-on-one for an interview with someone. That interview it will last about 10 minutes, and it might be with a member of the AdCom, or it might be with a second-year student. This 10-minute interview goes by super fast, and the types of questions that you're asked tend to fall into 2 different buckets. The first bucket are those sort of very typical MBA admissions types of questions, right? These will be things like, walk me through your resume, what are your short-term and long-term career goals, why do you want an MBA, and why do you want an MBA from Wharton specifically? You might get asked some leadership questions as well. Tell me about a time you led a team, tell me about a time you failed. All of those sort of typical interview questions that the other schools ask, that might be something that you get asked as well. Now, the one wrinkle, the one thing that is unique about the one-on-one interview that you obviously would not get with other schools is that you might get asked, how do you feel the TBD went? In other words, they might ask you, so, how did that feel? Right? How do you think do you think that your group got along well? Was there anything that could have been better in the way that your group interacted? Like, what do you think could have gone better? If you get asked, what do you think could have gone better? Resist the urge. Don't throw anyone in the group under the bus, right? Don't say, well, let me tell you about, Railroad Rick. This is one of the, in ApplicantLab, this is one of the, personas I make up for the sorts of people you might get in your TBD, right? Who's Railroad Rick? Railroad Rick, he's like a train. He just barges through the conversation, and he talks and 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 talks, choo, like he just doesn't stop talking, right? So if you have a Railroad Rick in your group, I don't want you to then say during your one-on-one interview, well, gosh, Railroad Rick just wouldn't stop talking, and I thought it was really terrible how he just dominated the conversation. He couldn't take the hint. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to throw anyone else in your TBD under the bus. I don't want you to put down anyone else in the group, because that will make you look sort of immature, and those are not the sort of interpersonal dynamics that Wharton is looking for. So I would not advise that you throw someone else under the bus. If the team performed in a suboptimal way, one of the things you could do is you could, instead of calling out one person in particular, you might say something like, oh, I think, instead of saying, well, Railroad Rick just wouldn't stop talking, he was a runaway train. Instead, maybe you could say something like, well, I really wish we could have heard more from Timid Tim and, Taciturn Terry. Like, I wish we could have heard more from them because I thought that they had really great ideas that unfortunately maybe might not have gotten aired. So see the difference? It's the same situation. It's the same situation where there was someone in the group who was dominating the conversation. But the difference, and this is a nuance, but it's an important nuance, instead of calling out Railroad Rick for dominating the conversation, instead we're saying, man, I really wish that the quieter people in the group would have had more of a chance to let their good ideas be known. Another question you might get is, did you play the role you normally play in a group? Why or why not? So this is an important question, and one of the things you need to do to prepare for the TBD is to sit down and be really honest with yourself and ask yourself, what is the role I normally play in a group discussion? Am I normally the synthesizer that takes everyone else's ideas and combines them together to come up with the best sort of collective idea? Am I the idea generator that's kind of the creative brainstorming type? Am I the operations person that says, okay guys, these ideas are great, but can we really make it happen? Can we really fly to the moon and back in only a 3-day, preterm thing? Maybe we can't. So when you are at work, or maybe when you are in your community service leadership role, what is that role that you normally play? So this is another piece of preparation that you can do. Ask yourself, what is that role that I normally play? And then ask yourself, was I that person today? So that way, if you get asked this question, you are ready to go. You can say, well, actually, yeah, normally I'm the person who generates a lot of the ideas, but since creative Chris had all these wonderful ideas, she really had the best ones, I decided this time to take a back seat. Or you could say, yeah, normally I'm the person in the team that brings up all of the logistical hurdles, and I was able to do that today. So I'm really pleased that you guys got to see what I'm normally like. So in sum, I want you to be prepared, but I don't want you to over-prepare because I don't want you to walk in with this very fixed idea into the TBD of like, okay, we have to do things my way, and we're going to do this, and at 3 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, we're going to have a tea break, and at 3:45 p.m. we're going to have cookies, and at 4 p.m. we're going to have a group bonding session. Like, if you prepare that much, you're just setting yourself up to fail because you're going to be overly prepared. And that way, if the conversation goes in a direction that is completely different, I don't want you to then fall apart and be like, oh, I've got nothing to say. So be prepared, yes, of course, but not too prepared. Prepare to be flexible. And to reiterate this, don't railroad the other people, but also don't be a wallflower either. You neither want to dominate the discussion, nor do you want to be completely silent. For the one-on-one, be ready with some typical MBA interview question answers, as you would with any interview, and be prepared to be thoughtful about analyzing what happened during the TBD and what your role was in it. And again, in case someone in the TBD happened to have not been performing well or happened to have been behaving badly, don't throw that person under the bus no matter how tempting it might be. Follow these tips and your Wharton MBA interview will be off to a great start. Thank you.